There we go. Hmm. Howdy, y'all. Welcome to History by Phillips. I'm Mr. Phillips, and this is part 3 of the video lecture series on Manifest Destiny. In the first video, we talked about the Oregon Country and the disputes about it, how the United States government went about acquiring it. Yesterday, we talked about the statehood of Florida and Texas. If you recall, Florida was populated by farmers from the Carolinas, Georgias, and Georgia and Virginia. They wore out their land from farming too much. They didn't give the land a break. The United States acquired Florida from Spain. All these farmers pour into Spain, start farming again, start raising cash crops, you name it, start populating Spain. We also talked about Texas. Now, Texas hasn't become a state yet. They are an independent republic. Remember, they rebelled against Mexico. Which, keep in mind, Mexico's a brand new country. They just won their independence from Spain, kind of like how the United States won their independence from Britain. Mexico won their independence from Spain. Texas, or is known as Tejas, spell it with the J, Tejas, was a Mexican state. Tejas didn't really agree with how Mexico was running its government. That they thought Mexico was trying to centralize the power too much, kind of like what we've been talking about with a strong central government versus a weak or a limited central government. People in Tejas thought Mexico was trying to create a too strong of a central government, so they would rebel. They would end up taking San Antonio. Uh, but one of the most famous battles, the Battle of the Alamo, occur. Famous Texan heroes, Travis Scott, Jim Bowie. You have Davy Crockett from Tennessee. You'll have Sam Houston, who would gather up forces while the Alamo was happening, ended up defeating General Santa Anna and San Joaquito. But I digress. But that'll bring us into today's to follow up pretty much from the Alamo. We'll be talking about the war with Mexico itself. Uh, Basically, this results down to the idea of manifest destiny. We're going to be talking about two things today in this video. We'll be talking about the lands that the Americans want and the war itself, how it played out. Ooh, I hate when my mouse does that. Just real quick, remember Texas is an independent republic right now. This is pretty much would be considered Texas right now, at least from the American side. Mexico considered Texas more in this region here, but we'll be talking about that in a moment. But the two places that we'll be talking about today is the New Mexico territory. You'll see it as right in this region, and the Mexican state known as California. But let's get into it. First, let me move my ugly mug here so y'all can see maps and such. Uh, so Americans, they want land. Uh, Manifest destiny is our God-given right. We're going to extend our borders from sea to shining sea. Be an example to the world. This is how government should work. This is how society should function. So on and so forth. Before all that, while all this land was under Spanish control, uh, they kind of forbade Americans from coming in. They didn't want Americans coming in just willy nilly because they scared if too many Americans would come in. They'll want to kind of claim it as their own and bring it to the United States instead of leaving it as a Spanish territory. Mexico thought differently. They was like, no, we need to generate income. We need some settlers in these areas. That way we can tax them, raise our tax bases, so on and so forth. Mexico wants to populate this because of money. They really need the money. It's a brand new government. They got to start from scratch. So they want folks to come in. This will be resulting from the Santa Fe Trail. If you remember from the first lecture series about the Oregon country, a lot of these trails that you heard of, the California Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, the Oregon Trail, for instance, all these trails, pretty much unofficially, you can say that they'd start here in Independence, Missouri. They would leave from Independence, Missouri. But one man in particular was Beck Beckwell. I forget his name. Beckwell. Anyways, he established this trail in 1821. He would start going back and forth. Now this trail is very hazardous. It's through a desert climate. There's not much water to be found. If you don't know where you're going, you can get lost very easily, and you can die of exposure, mostly from dehydration. So folks have to be really careful while they're going up through here, because I mean, you get disoriented, discombobulated, so on and so forth. But when Mexico claimed this land right here, back from Spain, they enticed Americans to come. It's like, hey, no, come over here, spend your money here, establish business, yada yada yada. Y'all come here and do your thing. Uh, so that's what they did. Uh, they started establishing different areas. You started seeing Americans pour in all over the place. Another uh, part of Mexico that Americans will be wanting is the Californian state. They would like this state right here. Uh, Good climate. You can do all sorts of things. California. It's located on the coast. That's the big thing. It's on the coast. Farming's all right there. It's so big. It has so much geographical diversity. Uh, California is just a good money making hub, and it is today. I do believe California is one of the prominent parts of the. Pardon me. California is an economic superpower in the United States. The economy, California is a huge part of that, or a good chunk of it, depending on GDP and all that good stuff. I digress. But before we start going in California, before we find out there's gold, let's understand a little bit about California. While the Spanish was there, they would go through start establishing a bunch of missions. They would set up a big string of missions from pretty much San Diego to Sonoma. I can't pardon my hillbilly accent here. I can't say some of these words too good. Anyways, but they started establishing these missions. And I remember missions are pretty much church buildings with a bunch of outbuildings around it. But they started establishing these missions. They spread their language, Spanish, obviously. Mexicans, they speak Spanish. That's from the colonization of Spain. They start sharing farming techniques that they brought from Europe, brought to the Americas, so on and so forth. So this place is starting to get its own cultural identity. But when Mexico won its independence, they went up to these missions and kind of just bought them from them. Like low bottoms, like here, we're taking your stuff. They would turn these into ranchos or really huge ranches. They would often hire Native Americans to work on these ranches, but they'd pay them horribly, yada yada yada. California is kind of getting mistreated by the Mexican government at this time, especially the Americans that are starting to pile in, coming from the California Trail and the Oregon Trail. They're not used to how Mexico does things, their culture, especially with government politics. Like the Mexican politics and the American politics at the time are just on different scales. They just think differently about things. I digress. But these are the lands that Americans want, especially since it'll connect it to the sea. You'll be from the Pacific Ocean on your west and Atlantic Ocean on your right. And one beneficial thing about having the ocean to your right instead of a country is you don't really have to worry about what that country is doing. We know what the ocean is going to do. It's just going to throw some waves on the beach and that's it. Meanwhile, if you had like Mexico still controlling this, you wouldn't really know what they're doing. You'd be kind of wary of them, yada yada yada. So that's another reason why Americans want this, just so they can be more defensible as a country in general. So, how does America take these lands? Well, it's manifest destiny, and it's our God given right. We'll find a way. President Polk, Young Hickory. I think named kind of after Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory. James K. Polk, Young Hickory. Uh, he needs an excuse to go to war. You can't just march into Mexico, start going to war. You just can't do that. It's illegal, blah blah blah. So he's got to figure out how can he get Mexico into war. If he can do that, he's confident that the American military can defeat Mexico. If he defeats them in this war, he can kind of just annex or just take this land from them. So let's see about what he goes about doing. The war. So President Polk needs an excuse to draw Mexico into war. One thing is nobody agreed on the Texas Mexican border. Remember the Alamo, Sam Houston, and all that. They won Texas independence. Texas is a republic. Well, Texans viewed the border as right here on the Rio Grande. That's what it is today. Meanwhile, Mexico's like, no, your border is right here on the Duches. Uh, so no one agreed. So here's James K. Polk. Here's the excuse he needs. He's going to send General Zachary Taylor. He'd eventually become president. So General Taylor, he's going to march in this disputed area, trying to entice the Mexicans to shoot at them. Well, the Mexicans view this as an invasion. They do fire upon. They do attack Zachary Taylor. They do this on what was it? Spring, summer, yeah, April 25th, 1845. They would attack him. Polk would tell Congress like, "Hey, Mexico invaded us. They're starting to shoot at our boys. We need to go to war with them." Uh, That's what he told Congress, but he found his excuse to go to war. One person that seemed very fishy of this, he was on the spot committee. I think this might be the first time that we're going to mention him in the survey of U.S. history. Is Abraham Lincoln? You don't know congressmen? They typically serve on different committees. Well, Abraham Lincoln was on a spot committee. Pretty much, he's just going through past actions, looking at everything, make sure everything's hunky dory. He found this suspect. He kind of figured Zachary Taylor just wasn't here to entice Mexicans shoot at him. But I digress. It's manifest destiny. It's our God-given right to take this over. So that's what Americans are going to do. President Polk's got his excuse. Mexico shot at Taylor. Polk convinced Congress we need to go to war. So we're going to war. Uh, Polk has a three-phase plan. One, he's going to drive all the Mexican forces out of Texas. He's got to get rid of them. He's getting Texas independent. He's going to help Texas out because eventually Texas is going to join the Union. He's going to drive all the Mexican forces out of Texas. Second is drive them out of the New Mexico and Californian territories. He's going to get them out of there. But Mexico, if they're wanting to hang on still, they're going to go in and take Mexico City, their capital. Uh, that's exactly what happens. It takes about 2 years to do. But meanwhile, while this is going on, California, the Mexican state of California, well, up north, especially where a lot of these American settlers have been trickling in from the Oregon and California Trail, in Northern California, they had a revolt against Mexico. Go back to my a revolt against Mexico. They overthrew the Mexican forces there. There wasn't too many Mexican forces stationed in uh, Northern California. They overthrew them and they declared California independent, kind of like how Texas declared themselves independent. They declared California independent. They call it the Bear Flag Republic. You can still see this in California's flag today. They do still have that bear on their flag, kind of like how we got 3 stars. They got a bear. But yes, the Bear Flag Republic, but it only lasts about 6 months. They'd get absolved into the United States real quick. But meanwhile, so Americans didn't really have to try that hard in California, so they already have an uprising there. So they forced them out of Texas and got them out of the New Mexico territory. Still didn't want to surrender, but they eventually would because the Americans they would land in Veracruz here and marched about 300 miles to this way. It took about 6 months to get through this. The Americans eventually took it over. So the war would come to an end. It would be what would end it would be the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Basically, Mexico is forced to sign this treaty. This will give all this land to the United States. Remember, Texas will be joining in the United States here soon because remember, Texas is its own country at the moment. It's its own country at the moment. But Texas will get absolved in the United States shortly. But the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed on the 2nd of February, 1848, and part of this treaty is Americans would pay Mexico for like I think $15 million, and they would absolve Mexican debt, meaning Mexico don't have to pay off their. They don't have to pay the United States any more money. Whatever they owe the United States has been forgiven. War's over. Yada yada yada. But meanwhile, there's a little bit more to it. Uh, about 10 or not 10, about 5 6 years later, or not. Yeah, about 5 6 years later. Uh, They was building railroads. The railroads kicking off at the time. I think we'll be talking about that hopefully when we get back from winter break. Railroads very important for this part of U.S. history. Well, I digress. They're trying to build railroads here, but they realize like surveying the land, it's just gonna be too hard to go through here. Just too many mountains. Just the soil's not good. It's not bad. It's a whole lot easier and less if we and cheaper if we could build it through here. Problem is this is still Mexican territory, so they're gonna have to renegotiate the border with Mexico. Well, for $10 million, they would buy this. President Pierce would send Gadsden down there. That's why it's named Gadsden. Is named after our diplomat that we sent to Mexico. Gadsden offered $10 million for this plot. Now, this would upset a lot of Mexicans because there's a lot of corruption in the Mexican government at the time. A lot of Mexicans hated this, but I digress. The purchase went through. Uh, so yeah, that's how we get this pretty much the southern part of Arizona and New Mexico. But that's how the war went. Lasted about 2 years. Americans would seize all this land. Texas would end up joining the Union after they find some free states to join in. And we get the Gadsden Purchase, filling out the southern border. But now you have the United States all under one flag. Uh, Americans control everything from sea to sea. Uh, but the big question now is kind of the issue that the federal government's been ignoring this whole time is what are they going to do with slavery? It's just slavery's about to this point right here. What are they going to do with all this? Obviously, you figure the southerners, like the southern parts, that would be slave states, the northern part would be free states. It's not really how it's going to work. There's the idea of popular sovereignty is going to be there, but it's going to get twisted. You're going to see folks trying to rush in to vote for states that they're not a part of, so on and so forth. But slavery, I mean, there's nothing else really to focus on now. They're going to have to. They're forced to focus on the issue of slavery now. You're going to see it become real prevalent. We'll be talking about abolitionism. That's a big word. Y'all need to go ahead and look into it. Abolitionism. Pretty much the folks that are wanting to abolish slavery. We'll be looking at that. But I digress. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the statehood of California and Utah. There's going to be a lot of gold. Basically, there's going to be a lot of gold in California. We're going to have some Chinese immigration here too. Say not some of the first Asian immigrants to the United States, but big part of it. It's going to be a big hunk of coming in from this one, from the I guess you could say Far East. Then we'll be talking about the Mormons here in Utah, so on and so forth. But that's all I got for y'all today. Make sure y'all come into study block today, 1:30. Till then, take care, stay safe, peace, and I will see y'all later.